When The Last of Us 2 came out, I was very one-sided with how I felt about the game. So much to the point that I never even purchased the game. I never put a controller in my hand and actually delved into the experience of what this narrative was going to give me. Weeks prior to the release of The Last of Us Part 2, I ran into some leaks about how the story was going to play out and how you're going to play as Abby for like half the game and Joel dying. But even when I found out, I was not turned off by the game at all. I was excited. I actually wanted to see how everything played out. I wasn't going to let some spoilers like that dictate how I was going to feel about a game who's not even been released yet. I had to give it a fighting chance. So, a couple days when it came out, I started watching a playthrough of it for the first 2 hours, and right at the 2 hour mark, I was going to decide whether I wanted to purchase the game or not. And of course, if you're familiar with the game, you know what happens right at the 2 hour mark. And my decision was made there. I was going to continue watching the playthroughs of the story, and I wasn't even going to bother even purchasing the game. I was more upset with the narrative more than, I could care less about the gameplay. I didn't play The Last of Us games for the gameplay, I played for the story. And you're going to have a very similar experience watching the story as you are going to play it. So that's how I was going to experience it. So then, with my experience with the story came to its conclusion, I had very, very strong opinions of really not liking the direction that they went, along with a bunch of other countless players in the, Last of Us fan base and whatnot. It was very, very divided. There was either one side of people who really loved it for what they did, and then there's people who just really hated what they did. And leading up to most recent times now, I've watched a lot of critical analysis and video essays on the story of The Last of Us Part 2. Videos of like how it divided the fan base and how this game was a masterpiece and why a lot of people love the game, but also on the sides of why people really hated the game as well. And then so for the past couple weeks, I was just sitting here brainstorming, trying to concoct somehow a compelling experience, one or two things that I could change to make this game so much more accepting to everybody. Something that could change how I perceived the story, how I digested everything, how it could have made everything's flow so much more better, narratively driven wise. And then when I was at work, it finally hit me. I found the one minor change that could have made The Last of Us Part 2 arguably one of the greatest stories created in gaming history. And we will get right into what that actually is. Stay tuned. It took me a very long time, but I came into terms with the story of The Last of Us Part 2. I understand the direction that Naughty Dog took with it. I understand that the overall theme here that Naughty Dog is trying to convey to us is the cycle of revenge. That even though that we have a strong attachment and connection to the protagonists that we know and love from the first game, that these new characters that come into this game, they have their own backstories too and their own motives, and they're the main characters of their story, and Ellie is perceived as the antagonist of theirs. Now at this point in time, I may no longer take the story personal, which is why I've personally had so much hatred towards how they did it. Now I'm just more objective to it and just it is how it is. I respect that the way that they told it. It's just not my cup of tea. I didn't like the way that it was told. And, the whole cycle of revenge thing. I mean, it's nothing new. But it's like you could sit there and do that with every other narrative. It's like, yeah, of course, every other character has their own backstory and their own, it's a psych, it's just, there's obviously going to be more than one's perspective to every story. Whether it's like a hero, you always see it from the hero side. It's like, well, what if you see it from the villain side? And then, it's just, it's okay, it's okay. So for this what if alternate change to this story, we're gonna keep the theme the same. A lot of the elements and key events are gonna stay the same. It's just I'm gonna change one minute thing that's just gonna change the perception and the emotional investment into this story that they're trying to tell. So now you're probably wondering, okay, well, what is this change? Is this gonna be something obvious as like, is it something to do with Joel's death? Nice thought, but no. You thought I was gonna go that route, but I'm not. Is it something that's gonna change towards in-game time? No. This is gonna be early on in the game. It's gonna be right around the same time of Joel's death, but don't worry, Joel's death will be not changed. He's gonna die no matter what. I feel like he just kind of has to, and just for the sake of this, he is going to stay dead no matter what. Now, when I bring up this point, I want you guys to really think about what I'm saying here. Now, for me, what I would change is who runs into Abby when she gets overran by the infected. So what I'm changing, it's not going to be Joel. Okay? It's not going to be Joel. So, what if instead of Joel and Tommy running into her, what if Ellie and Dina took Joel and Tommy's route? Okay? So, let's put this into a hypothetical sequence here. So, let's say they switched routes. Joel and Tommy went and did Ellie and Dina's route, and then vice versa. So, of course, when that happens, it's going to end up being Ellie and Dina who save Abby from the infected. So, right off the bat, what this is going to do, this is going to establish an immediate connection, build-up between Ellie, Dina, and Abby within the first 2 hours of the game. I think that is what really was missing in the beginning of the game. This immediate connection will enhance every emotion felt by these characters throughout the rest of the game. So this is my way of starting it off as them becoming not necessarily friends, but kind of acquaintances. Kind of like, just really tolerating, starting to build a better connection into maybe acquaintance and friends. But definitely going to be acquaintance by the time all this stuff ramps up. And so this is going to play out similarly to how it was with Abby and Joel and Tommy, where she's going to take them back to their little hideout for safety and to regroup. So of course there's going to be a cutscene of dialogue exchange here, and then they're kind of learning a little bit about each other, and Ellie and Dina are telling them a little bit about Jackson, and then of course they introduce themselves, and then Abby finds out that this is Ellie. Now there is thoughts right here in Abby's head that are brewing. There's two options to go down, so we're going to give you two ways that this can go down. Number one, obviously Abby takes Ellie and Dina as hostage. So in a sense, you're quite literally flipping the roles of Joel and Ellie in this scenario, and on your way to find Ellie, you play as Joel one last time, accompanied by Tommy. So then when they go down to the basement, Tommy gets knocked out, and then of course Joel gets his knee shot off. Boom, everything's going to play out very similar throughout the sequence, and then of course Joel is going to end up getting killed, and then boom, everything gets played out in a very similar fashion. Now, option two, instead of Abby taking both of them hostage right then and there, she kind of thinks to herself, I can get Ellie to take me to Joel in Jackson without a scratch on me. And then I could be able to take Joel right underneath from all their noses without alerting anybody. So Abby successfully captures Joel, takes him back to the hideout, and then the entire cutscene plays out as normal with slight little altercations just based on what just happened. What other option that you want, it just depends on you. For me, I think I would take, and that is kind of tough, I probably would take the first option just so I can have that one more chance to play with Joel in a little sequence again. That would be nice. But at the exact same time, in option 2, you get that fulfillment like on Abby's side to where it's like she actually worked for her revenge, and you kind of actually play as her to act, to fill out that revenge. It doesn't feel like it's just handed to her on a silver platter. I know what some of y'all probably think, it's like, but what's the point of that? Like, you changed very small, but it all ended in the same manner, like you're just playing out the same scenarios. How does that change anything? It changes a lot, actually. Because now there's so much more context to this scene where Ellie is looking over Joel's grave. Not only is she feeling sad, upset, and of course very vengeful towards Abby in the fact of Joel's death, but now she feels guilt. She feels responsible for Joel's death. She started to trust this stranger, started developing a bond with her, potentially giving her identity away, not knowing that this could happen, that she could be tricked into either leading her into Jackson to get Joel taken away, or vice versa, getting held as a hostage. And watching all this play out, us as the players are gonna feel kind of mixed about it. It's like, damn, Ellie, you had more hands-on causing the death of Joel, but yet we also kind of understand that you weren't aware, you just didn't know. It's not necessarily your fault, but of course you know how things play out. That doesn't change the fact of how these characters are going to feel. Regardless of how much fault it was towards Ellie, she's going to feel guilty of being the one that led to that point. Think how much this actually would hurt, considering that she didn't fully make amends with Joel yet up to that point. So then, of course, that's going to be weighing on her as well. She took that away from herself. So not only does this scene itself have more of an emotional impact on Ellie's side, this also creates a more emotional, stronger impact and confrontation between her and Abby. Well, everything's going to play out quite similar, but there's just going to be a lot more impactful context behind it between the two characters. Now this cycle of revenge feels so much more personal. So when they have that final fight at the end of the game, Ellie has to understand and try to figure out that it wasn't her fault, and she needs to learn to forgive herself, reclaim her humanity, and break this cycle of violence. Now that it would be the one change that I would make to The Last of Us Part 2. Let me know in the comments section. Do you agree? What change would you make? And just how do you feel about the game? If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and it's been your boy Ellison, and I will catch you guys on the next video. Peace.